Let me get her started. Okay. So now I want to make sure we're thinking the same as each other. And let's see. Okay. So, bing. Okay, I'm pulling this up, seeing where we're at. Okay. Take a look. We are going to finish up the first chapter today. So we can see here that on Monday, you are supposed to be doing before Monday. You can do it anytime before Monday, okay? The chapter one quiz and the second discussion forum. Did anybody do the quiz yet? I didn't actually look at the grade book. Anybody attempt it? You did, Kamaya? Was it easy? Easy peasy? Maybe not easy
It
peasy.
was pretty easy. I think I got like one or two wrong.
Great. Remember, the deal is you can take that as many times as you so desire. It is only the last grade that is the one that counts in there. And I can tell you, I added these quizzes last year in the last time I taught this course. And overwhelmingly, students told me that taking these quizzes really helped them to get a better handle on the material, because you got exposed to different questions. And I mean, that's a basic finding in psychology. They call it the testing effect. That if you really want to learn material, you test yourself on it and you learn from testing. That's Henry Roediger's theory, and it's not just a theory. I mean, well, it is a theory, but it's well supported. And so, if you want to try it again, you can do it as many times as you want, Kamaya. It's totally on your choice. It's up to you. Okay. So then, I wanted to quick point out on the discussion forums because I some of the ones that I got were not so awesome, let's just say, okay? And I want to make sure that you have an idea of what, no, that's the wrong thing, that's the wrong thing, what a good and a bad one. Remember, this one is like overkill. I don't want to say overkill because it's awesome and I really appreciate it, okay? But it's even more than I would have expected in a good example. This is a crap example. Now on the one that I just graded, the two that I just graded, I was pretty generous in this, that I was getting a lot more. Most of them were a lot similar, more like this than like this. Okay, so um, I don't remain generous. All right, not quite generous as I was the first time. I know these forums are kind of a pain in the ass, but the research has clearly shown students that do in fact engage in the material are the ones that are going to do better. They just do. I mean, there's plenty of research. This is backed up. This is not just giving you a burden to deal with. No, actual research has shown that the students that perform on these are the ones that succeed in class. Okay, so it is what it is. Here is the example. Just know that the grade that you got on those first two might not be what I would do moving forward. So if you kind of, let's face it, if you turn in a piece of crap like this and you still got a 10 on it out of 15, that's because I was being the nice guy. Okay. So let's not turn this shit in. It's garbage. It's no good. There's no point to it. So let's do it. And move forward. Okay, cool. So enough to that one. Okay. All right, so let's go in and get ourselves some materials to learn. Okay. So the other day we laid out this idea that Dr. Phil ain't psych. That's it. That's a small little sliver of psych. And we talked kind of very briefly about some of the philosophy that went behind psychology, right? In particular, we had talked about the empiricists and the rationalists, and how we find that modern psychology, the way we think of it now, is a science, right? It is a science, but it is a science that is got like philosophers in our background, naturalists, physiologists, physicians. We have background in all parts of almost most disciplines, and some way or another have fed into psychology. Okay, so as we had said in the history of psychology, the most important person was Titchener, but the only reason he was important was because he was so shitty, right? That the reason he just is just crap. It just no good, no good. Okay. So if you recall, we had briefly said William James said, in order to really study psychology, you need to study the function. You don't want to describe mental processes or describe the things that are happening. No, you want to talk about the purpose. What is the function of that thing? Okay. Clearly coming directly out of Darwinian thinking. Okay? And so now here, I believe is where we were kind of stopping. Oh, no. We did this one. Yeah, that's right. There I am going, Freud, there's what I feel about you. Okay, I got it. Okay, so then the behaviorist who had rejected, and that's right, we did Maslow. All right, sweet. Okay, so that's right, we got to here. So now we kind of lay out, the history a little bit and kind of where we come from, because, nothing emerges from thin air. And so let's talk about some of the things that are hugely important. The nature nurture question. So the question is like, how much of what you are was already in place the day you were born? And how much of who you are is the result of the experiences across your lifetime? So nature and nurture. And again, this is a philosophical discussion that goes back for 1,000 years or more. This is just a modern version of Aristotle and Plato having a conflict. I mean, there's just no differences here. Huh? So we're going to find that this nature nurture issue is interesting, because it's not just it's like every single one of us shares some commonality. Okay, we all share somewhere, I don't know, 99%. If you pull out our genetic code and you lay them out next to each other, we're going to be like 99% similar. Something, I don't exactly remember the number, but whatever it is really, really high. Okay. But what's going to happen is, even though we're born genetically almost identical, almost, what's going to happen is we're going to be born into radically different worlds. And because we're born into radically different worlds, we come out to be incredibly different people. Okay. And so the question sometimes is, which one is more important, nature or nurture? Well, we're going to come back to that question a lot. We'll be talking about the influences of nature and nurture on intelligence, the effect of nature and nurture on personality, the effect of nature and nurture on weight, all right, and all kinds of different characteristics and features. All right. So now, I don't want to like throw the pot out there and say, one is a winner, that you can't say, oh, it's nature or it's nurture. It's obviously a combination, right? So on the nature side, we had Plato, Darwin, Descartes, okay, or even John, no, what am I trying to say? No, this is the Immanuel Kant over here, perhaps. Over here, we have Aristotle, we have John Locke, and later on, we have like John Watson, for example, on the nurture side. But it's like this, okay? I love this quote at the bottom. Nurture works on what nature endows. Okay. That is, the nature we have, the biology that we're born with, limits what we can do. Or nature, the environment that we grow, or nurture rather, the environment around us determines how our biology will express itself. Okay. So we find, maybe somebody has the biology to be incredibly smart. They got, they got the smart genes. Okay. That's a technical term. the smart genes. But somebody who's born with smart genes is born into a terrible environment, an environment that does not allow that child to develop. It doesn't give them education and doesn't give opportunities. And it just doesn't matter what the nature was if the nurture doesn't support it. Okay. Now we're going to come across this question a lot because it is a complex question. But unfortunately, what happens is more often than not, we're going to find that nature is more important than nurture. All right. That is one of my favorite examples is this one uh, when I was in New York. All right. My wife was friends with this girl named Jennifer, one of her classmates, and Jennifer was a big girl. Right? She was a very large girl, and she came from a big family. And what I mean big, I mean lot of people and lot of body volume, shall we say. And so I remember we went to her Jennifer family's house for I guess it was a Father's Day gathering. I think it was Father's Day. And it was crazy. We're sitting outside on the picnic table, and here's Jennifer, Jennifer's mom, Jennifer's dad, Jennifer's sister, Jennifer's sister, Jennifer's brother. I was like, wait a minute, what happened? What's up here with this one kid, David? Why is David so skinny? I don't get it. Why in this room here or this group of people? How come one kid is that? Oh, David was adopted. When was David adopted? When he was, a baby, 6 months old, we adopted him, and he's this big. So you're saying David grew up in this house, was exposed to the same kitchen table, the same attitudes towards eating and food, the same everything, and this is David. I was like, yep, that's it. Okay. So we see that, in many cases when we say, oh, what's more important, nature versus nurture? And we're gonna find that nature almost always comes out the more influential, not always, but almost always the more influential part of the nature nurture question. But then at another extreme, another one very interesting is, my wife, as I told you, my wife is Korean, so we'd go to the Korean church, and when you go to the Korean church, after service it's the Korean church is an event. It's a whole day event for families, and it is a big deal. And so after service, all the families are going to gather in the gymnasium or something, and for a meal. Everyone is going to come in for a meal. So you see all the extended families. You see grandparents and parents and kids and all of them. Okay. And what's crazy is you go in there and you look at, the Korean grandparents, and they're like 5 feet tall at best. Then you look at the Korean parents, and they're like 5'7". And then you look at the Korean teenagers, especially the boys, and they're like 6'4" or some shit like that. I don't know. It's huge. And so all of a sudden, what's going on? And so my wife tells me this story repeatedly because her father was a relatively short man, and he grew up during the war, and he had no food. He had no, I mean, nothing but barley, and we hear this story a lot. Okay, nothing but barley and kimchi, no rice, no meat, no nothing. So of course, because of the environment he grew up in, he just didn't have the potential to be taller. Okay. So my wife says when she's growing up in her generation, there was you had rice every single day, but meat was still like a once a week thing, and even fruits and dairy and things like that were just really not available. But yet, rice was a staple, an everyday item. Now, the current generation of Korean children, they have access to everything. I mean, meat 7 days a week, whatever. Do you want dairy? What do you want, right? And so, because these three generations have different access and had different environmental influences, literally 5'4", 5'7", 6'3", just like that across three generations. But what's going to happen is, look at this. It doesn't matter. So what does that mean? Is the next generation going to be 6'8" and then 7'9"? No, come on, silly. All right. All the environment can do is bring out the potential that's inside. That's it. It can't do more than that. Okay. So whatever the potential was, so this implies that the Korean grandparents had the potential to be over 6 feet tall, but their environment did not allow that to come out. Okay? Good, good, good. All right. So, what we're going to find is that as we start studying different things in psychology, we're going to come across this basic model, okay? The biopsychosocial model. Okay, I like the biopsychosociocultural model. Okay, I like to make sure culture gets in the story, but culture does fit. Where is it here? Culture does see here they cheated, and now it's not just social influence; it's sociocultural. So they do. There is a recognition that it's there, but the idea is if you want to study anything, what is this? Oh, this is personality, and you want to understand personality or intelligence or anything else about humans. You have to understand the biology that feeds into it. You have to understand the influences that come into it from the outside. So this is a nature, this is a nurture. And then here we've got a third factor, right? Psychological factors, internal cognitive processing factors. And so if you want to understand personality or intelligence or anything else, you got to take a combination of all three of these to figure it out, okay? Or as the Venn diagram over here shows. Okay, cool. So the first step is to help us to understand this biological influence thing. So I'm very, very, very briefly going to kick in a little bit of evolution today, right? Just a little tiny bit. And so one year, every spring, it's usually in April. Every April at Texas Wesleyan University, we have something called University College Day. And before COVID, right? Before COVID, these things were awesome. I mean, after COVID, we'll see. But pre-COVID, they were amazingly cool days where students present different projects they did in classes. And I mean, it's just really cool. And there was always a keynote speaker, somebody that came in somewhere on the lunchtime, and the whole university came in and listened. And one year we had this guy, the Reverend Michael Dowd. Okay. The Reverend Michael Dowd, who has a ministry. He travels around the country preaching a ministry, and his ministry is called Thank God for Evolution. And it's like, wait a minute, guy. I think you're confusing things. Thank God for evolution. And so he pretty sophisticated the way he says it, and I'm summarizing greatly, but he says if we simply start talking about evolution, then we say that 99% of what we are is identical. It doesn't matter which human beings on the planet we're talking about, we're the same people. We've got the same influences, the same ancestry, the same genetics. We are the same. Instead, what's happening around the world is that we're mired. We have conflicts everywhere, conflict, because people just focus on that 1% that we're different. Okay. Oh, I'm from the east, you're from the west. I'm, I guess, north, south, right? I'm a liberal, you're a conservative. I'm this, you're that. So we have to have conflict. Well, the Reverend Michael Dowd says, no, we are 99%. Why don't we start with that? Why don't, instead of saying we're 1% different, we must fight, why don't we say we're 99%, let's work out that tiny 1%? And I'm like, somebody thought it was a good idea. I thought it was a great idea. Okay. I thought it was a genius idea. And so he argues that an understanding of evolution will help us to understand what we share in common. Okay. And so we perhaps know from your high school biology class, evolution is a change in the average characteristics, blah, 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 blah. But evolutionary psychology says that when you have discussions of evolution, that, the way Darwin presents it, he talks about a tall giraffe or a short giraffe or some crap like this. But the psychologists say, do you know what? It's not just physical characteristics of an animal that can get selected through evolution, but it can be behaviors as well. Okay. Behaviors. And so if one animal has higher intelligence and it allows them to solve more problems, then that animal will be more likely to survive and reproduce. So it's all of a sudden the evolutionary selection of a psychological process. Okay, so it's not just physical characteristics, but psychological processes are also part of evolution. And so, yeah, I'll leave that for a different class. So we find that evolution is considered to be a fact and a theory. It's a fact in that the very definition of evolution, like I say, is the change in the average characteristics of a population across time. Animals change. There's nobody's going to question animals change. That they are. I mean, all you got to do is dig out fossils, and if you dig some fossils out of the ground from even 10,000 years ago, and you take those fossils and you compare them to modern animals, they're totally different. Okay, they're different from each other. Animals change. That's just, in that sense, evolution is just a statement. It just is. It becomes a theory, however, when you start talking about why. Why did it change? Okay. And it's a developing theory. Evolution is not set in stone. I mean, the theory of evolution is still clearly being, every day new information is being found. Okay. So the exact mechanism why it changes is what is the theory. Huh? So Charles Darwin was a smart guy, but he didn't just spring from nothing, right? Charles Darwin, there was people before him that set up some ideas, like here Thomas Malthus, right? This dude, he sets up this idea that food supplies tend to rise in a straight line, what they call arithmetically, whereas populations of organisms tends to rise what they call geometrically, shaped like this. And so what happens is that animals, there will always be more animals born than the environment can support. And so, in other words, what says Thomas Malthus in some slightly, uh, animals are going to die. Okay, for every, when it, and I mean that's too bad. Animals will die. Okay. The question is which ones are going to die, and that's what Charles Darwin is famous for, because he laid out the idea that sure, there's always going to be more animals than the environment can support. Someone's going to die. Who dies? And what Charles Darwin basically said is nature selects who dies. It is nature, it is the environment that the animal lives in is what decides who will live and who will die. Okay? Nature selects for it, right? So what he said was those animals that have the physical characteristics that allow them to survive in this current environment will be the ones to pass along those traits and characteristics to their offspring. Okay? I love natural selection. It's a cool idea. But that is not the only thing. It is not just nature that is going to select who lives and dies and to select who will have babies, but sexual selection. In every, I'm going to be careful. I'm not a biologist, but in every animal species that I am aware of, it is the female of the species that makes choices about who they mate with. And so females are the ones that choose which male will pass along their genetic material. That is just how it works in the world. And so we see some crazy things happening as a result of that. Here we've got a peacock on the right, which is a male, and a peahen on the left, which is a female. And she makes decisions about which boy she'll mate with. And she prefers pretty boys. Right? She likes pretty boys. And so she will only mate with the prettiest boy with the biggest feathers, that is the cleanest and nicest. Okay? And so it's really her that selects. And so all of a sudden, why do these male peacocks have these giant, massive feathers? Because the females will only mate with a male if they have big feathers. Okay, that's pretty cool. Human beings have driven a lot of evolution through artificial selection. That is, we as human beings have made decisions about what we want. All right. Some of the simplest one are cows. You know, if you've ever worked on a farm, I've worked on a farm. Okay, and when you're milking cows, you know what? Sometimes they kick you, and it's not cool when a cow kicks you. All right, get out, buddy. It is not cool when a cow kicks you. All right. And so what happens? I can just imagine at some point in time, Farmer Brown, he's got a couple of cows. And Farmer Brown's wife says, honey, I want a steak dinner. And you know what Farmer Brown says? I know exactly who I'm making into a steak dinner. And by doing so, Farmer Brown has selected has selected, or in this case, chose the aggressive cow to kill. The aggressive cow no longer has babies. And now the modern cows are the most docile creatures in the world. They are so stupid and calm. I cannot imagine you could do anything to a cow to piss them off. I just can't imagine it. They're that stupid. And it's because Farmer Brown, quite accidentally, well, to his own benefit anyway, he didn't know he was changing the evolution of a species. He was just like, I got to milk these cows every single day. That dude kicks me, it's gone, or she's gone, right? I guess it better not be an it, better be a she if you're milking it. If you're milking a he, you're doing it wrong, buddy. Oh, here is an interesting example that happened in Russia. There was these two researchers here, and they were studying foxes. The plural of fox is fox, right? I don't know. Studying a group of fox. I get it one of these times. And they didn't have very good research funding. They needed money to fund their research, so they came up with a plan to create a domestic fox. So a fox that you would have in your home as a pet, just like a dog would be a pet. And so what they did was they chose these foxes. There was some variability. Some foxes were very shy. By the way, a wild fox, if you approach them, they run away. If they're cornered and you continue to approach, they will attack. Okay, they have the ability to show aggression, but by far the majority of the time they would much rather retreat. Okay, so they found though that some fox were more frightened and some were less frightened, and so they simply took the least frightened foxes and bred them. And so now all of a sudden, the second generation, they found some of the second generation was more and less friendly, for lack of a better word, and so on and so on. And after about 8 generations, they had a breed of fox that were so friendly, they just like a stupid dog, they'll come up and they'll lick your face and they'll do all of this stuff. And so then they were able to sell these fox as pets in a pet store. Okay, so apparently you can get a pet fox if you're in Russia. So pretty cool idea. All right, so we find that an understanding of evolution really does help us to understand psychology. Okay, so what we find is that around the world, what has happened, and this was a cross-cultural study that they did. Look at all these little dots on here. In all of these different parts of the world, they did this similar study. And it was, number one, universally, men are more recreational about sex. They're more willing to say, it's not a big deal, let's just do it, it's just for fun. Okay. However, across the world, and this is amazing, that women, rephrase that. Evolution says men should be attracted to females that have the ability to have lots of offspring. Females should be attracted to males that have lots of resources to help care for the offspring. Okay, and so yeah, that's how it works. Is that around the world, this is a true thing, and not only is evolutionary psychology do this, they've actually researchers have actually gone to dating websites and they've looked at dating profiles, And they found by far the majority of the time when males put out their profiles, they're going to promote their successes, their access to materials. Look at me, I have this fancy car. Look at me, I have this rich lifestyle. Whereas women are far more likely to focus their profiles on their youth and their looks. Okay, so pretty interesting that such a primitively based behavior would still be found even in social media. So there it is. We find that the implications of evolutionary theory are pretty strong. And that is, we see here, somewhere up in here is a human. There's a human. Look at that up. Is that a Charles Darwin image? It looks like they might have made Charles Darwin on here. It's too small even for me. I wonder if I blow it up. Whoop. Oh, it is. They did. Oh, I like it. Homo sapiens, Charles Darwin. That's cute. But you see what it implies here is that if you want to find which animal do we share the most in common with, guess what? You follow back the tree and find chimpanzee is the most common. You want to follow back, you find, what does that even say? A baboon. A baboon. You'll go back, you get lemurs. You go back, you get other prime, prosimians rather, okay? You keep going back. And so what happens is that you will share a lot of things in common with a chimpanzee. You'll share fewer things in common with a baboon, but more than you do with the lemur. It's like, okay, that's pretty cool. And so what we find is that parts of what we are, and in fact, here, this is one second. Parts of what we are as humans arose before we were human. Okay. One of the most interesting things is emotions. Okay. And we'll do an entire chapter on emotions somewhere closer to the end of the course. And what you find is that emotions, the emotions that animals exhibit, are the same emotions that we exhibit. And here's a more of a modern idea here. And the idea is emotions serve an adaptive purpose. They allow you to adapt to your environment and to survive. So check it out. If there's an event in the environment that is a threat, we'll have a feeling of danger, or a thought of danger, an emotional feeling of fear, and that emotional feeling of fear will lead to a behavior of escape. And if we escape, then we become safe. Okay, that is really adaptive, right? I mean, look at that. An emotion, a feeling state, leads to an outcome which allows us to survive. Guess what? This exact same chain of events up here would apply to a dog, a rabbit, a dinosaur. I don't care what animal you're wanting to talk about. This chain works. Okay, it works. In other words, this thing called an emotion, which feels so complicated and so human-like. No. It's been around for eons and eons, right? And that's what Darwin lays out for us, that we are a product. What we are is a product of many, many years of evolutionary selection. Huh? I like that. Here is a cool one. I like this one. This right here, they've done DNA analyses and genetic analyses, and it turns out, for most of you, and we're going to talk more details on chromosomes and DNA and genes in chapter 2, but from chapter 3, I guess. Most of what you are is a combination of mom and dad, right? Mom gives you some, dad gives you some, and it's a mix and it's a random, and it's like this. But there's part of your DNA, specifically called mitochondrial DNA, that you get directly from mom. It is just like copy and paste. It's like put it on a photocopy machine, okay? Here's mom, photocopy it, here's you, okay? And so what you find is that it's identical, but if you've ever looked at a photocopy really closely and compare it to the original, there's itty bitty tiny little defects in that photocopy. There always is. And in the same way, even though in some technical sense, your mitochondrial DNA is a copy and paste, there are tiny little differences. Okay. So the mitochondrial DNA between you and your mom is oh, this different. That's it. The mitochondrial DNA between you and your mother's mom is this much. And between you and your mom's mom, this much. Okay? You get the idea is that each generation, it's just a and so by using this very, very predictable rate of change, researchers can look at the mitochondrial DNA of any two human beings on the planet and figure out the last time they had a shared ancestor. When is the last time you shared a grandma? Okay, and it turns out that it does not matter where you go on the planet. The furthest back that they have ever found is 100,000 years. That I mean, and no, that is to say that is the last point. Every human being, if you go to 100, and it's probably less than that if they had better work done, but if you go to 100,000 years ago, you would find a grandma that we all share in common, a common grandmother. Now, in the game of evolution, 100,000 years is just a blink of the eye, okay? So in this game, we shared a grandma and shared common genetic material in a blink of an eye. So of course we're going to be the same. Of course we are. Okay? Like it. But it also leads to some crazy things because evolution is slow, but the world around us can change very quickly. Okay? And so the one of the biggest examples of this thing called mismatch theory. Mismatch theory is the idea that we are the product of evolutionary selection to a world that does not exist anymore. You know, within the last 10,000 years, I mean, we have not changed in the last 10,000. Heck, let's even go 5,000 years. The last 5,000 years, genetically, we are exactly the same creatures over 5,000 years. But can you imagine how different our cultural worlds are? Can you imagine somebody 5,000 years ago imagining they would be on a computer doing a collaborate classroom? And you're like, no, I don't think they did. So what's happening is you are expected to perform and behave in a 21st century fashion using a brain which is ideally suited for living in caves. Yeah, you got a caveman brain trying to run around in 21st century. Wow, that don't work. And so often we find a mismatch. One of the biggest ones, this comes from biology. I'll come back to psychology in a bit, but this one really screams it out. When a baby turtle is, sea turtles are born, they have an instinct. Okay, as soon as they hatch, they start walking towards the brightest, shiniest spot they can find. Now, in the ancestral past, the bright and shiny spot was the moonlight or the starlight, which was reflecting off the water. And so that this instinct to move towards the lightest thing they could find, it served them very well. Now, human beings have moved in, have changed their environment, and all of a sudden along the beach, there's beach houses, and they got floodlights out front. And as soon as the baby sea turtles are born, where do you think they go? The floodlights. That is not how a baby sea turtle survives, okay? And so now all of these rich people on the beach, they make a big deal. Oh, we rescue the turtles. Are you kidding me? You're the ones that are killing them, you dumbass. You're not rescuing them. You're just preventing the death that you've created. Preventing the death you've created is not the same as saving them, okay? That's not the same, okay? We find that there's so many different parts of human beings that just don't match. You know, it turns out that when a husband is away from his wife for even 2 days, all of a sudden sperm count shoots to the roof. Presumably what this is to make it so that the man is more likely to impregnate a woman. It's like, okay, since this notion of marriage is and monogamy is such a brand new idea from a cultural perspective. The body is designed for the opposite. That's what it's designed for. Or here, testosterone. All right, this works for males and females, more true for males, but definitely both. The more promotions you get, the more testosterone you have. Okay, and in the world of monkeys, this makes sense because what happens is that if you are at the alpha monkey, you're at the top of the chain, you better be able to exhibit an awful lot of aggression to keep your position at the top. And that's what testosterone does. It leads to aggressive behaviors, or in the case of human beings, not necessarily aggressive so much as risky and stupid. And so what happens is we have those people that are promoted the highest, let's say presidents or something. By definition, they're the ones that should be making the most careful and calculated decisions. And yet evolution has set them up. The CEOs, the politicians are going to make stupid decisions because their testosterone level is too high, because that's the way that evolution made it. Wow. How about addictions? Right? It's like in our past, it's just like if something felt good or if something tastes good, that was an indication you're supposed to do it as often as possible, right? Anytime you can. Because I mean, food is scarce, and you find fruit, you should eat as much fruit as you possibly can. Because who knows if there's going to be fruit next time? You don't know bad stuff. Well, there was nothing out there that it was bad to do a lot of. Okay, there just wasn't. But we've created all kinds of things like heroin, right? What is heroin? I mean, feels good, so I should do it more. No, that's not true, right? But one of my favorites is one of the biggest ones is obesity, and the idea is that again we across human history, food has been scarce, 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 and so when food becomes available, you should eat. If you find it, you should eat it. And so human beings have mastered processed corn syrup, right? I mean, we've created, oh my god, you can go over to the convenience store, any convenience store you want, and buy one of these sodas. And you know how many calories are in that sucker, and it's like 99 cents. Th- this this human tendency, which is burned into our genetic material, ought not to be placed into a convenience store where you can make that happen. Okay, that ought not happen. And to make it worse is this notion of the thrifty gene hypothesis, that evolution has in fact selected for human beings that use calories efficiently, that are very careful with the way they burn calories. All right. So it was a powerful idea that it just, wow. I mean, boom, 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 boom. There we go. Okay. Um, Here's another one where evolution can shape the behaviors, right? And we'll talk about development at some point. But what happens is an infant somewhere between 9 and 13 months old will develop stranger anxiety. So before 9 months or so, babies are really indifferent. They don't care who's holding them. You can just pass babies around the room. They're all cool with it. But somewhere around 9 to 13 months, they latch on to a very specific caregiver. And what will happen then is, I mean, you can see this baby's going, no, no, I'm not going there. I'm not touching that thing. And so what happens is that 9 to 13 months is that time when humans start to learn how to walk. That's where they start to be able to crawl or walk. And so what happens is that infants now at 9 to 13 months have the ability to get lost, right? Especially in an ancestral environment, they could get lost. And so if an infant becomes separated from their caregiver, they should be bothered by that. They should be screaming, Mom, here I am. Come find me. Come protect me. Okay. Pretty powerful idea. Or this one. I love this one. Um, People acquire a phobia. We'll talk more about phobias when we talk anxiety disorders, and heck, way at the end, maybe topic 15 or something, 16, 14, 15, something. And so what happens is there's a lot of people with phobias of snakes. A lot of people afraid of snakes. Very few people afraid of cars. This is 2022. What do you think is more likely to kill you, a snake or a car? Okay, that's the fact, man. And yet people aren't afraid of cars, and that makes no sense. Why? In our ancestral past, we there was no car, no, and so human beings that were afraid of snakes were more likely to avoid snakes and were more likely to survive and reproduce. Gotcha. And so it's amazing. And they've done some really interesting research studies about how easy it is to develop a fear of snakes. They've done it in a lab setting, and it's just you can develop a fear of snakes in 5 minutes, even if you don't have a fear of snakes. And then they tried to develop fear of like green squares, and they couldn't. It didn't matter how long they tried to work at it. They couldn't get people to be afraid of a green square. It's like, okay, we're not ready for that. We're ready to be afraid of snakes because that's what evolution has set us up for. All right. So we're enjoying, I love that one. So now let me move and talk a little bit about different angles on psychology. Okay. So let's say, for example, I could take a cognitive perspective on psychology, be thinking about cognition. And the kinds of research questions I might be asking is, like how reliable is memory? That sounds like something that would be used in a court of law, right? So a question to talk about how a witness testimony works. How can we improve our thinking? Yeah, that sounds like something that might be in the realm of an educational psychologist, perhaps. If you're thinking from more of a sociocultural perspective, right? Could our behavior and attitudes, the way you think, is it a product of the culture that you grow up in? Oh my God, I mean, I tell you, this to me is so weird. When I moved to Texas, my first son, he was in second grade when I moved here to Texas, and I found out pretty quickly that every single morning they had to say the Pledge of Allegiance, and that's great. And then I found out they had to say the Texas Pledge of Allegiance. What the hell? The Texas Pledge of Allegiance? That's just weird, okay? I've never in my life heard of that, and I've lived in many states, all right? So Texas, this is on you, all right? So I guess I'm Texan now after this many years. And so is it possible that some of the Texan pride that we find is simply the result of repeating the Texas Pledge of Allegiance on a daily basis? Maybe. All right. Our attitude comes from the experiences of our culture. I like it. All right. A behavior geneticist. Yes. Well, this is really kind of like part of that evolutionary psych thing. Could our behaviors, attitudes, etc., be programmed by instincts? Oh, absolutely, they are. Neuroscience. What role do our bodies and brains play in emotions? All right, I like this. How is pain inhibited? Or even better, how come some people exhibit more pain than other people exhibit? Right? You can have two people with the exact same injury, and some will express much more pain than others. Okay, and there's a biological reality to that. Uh, Psychodynamic, how much of your childhood experiences are influencing what you are today. A behaviorist might be like, where do our fears come from? How come we're afraid? Which experiences in our lifetime have created them? An evolutionary perspective, why are humans prone to panic, anger, and making irrational judgments? Oh my God. I was listening to a program one time, and they called it monkey economics. They found an island which was filled with retired monkeys that had been zoo monkeys and circus monkeys and stuff, and they were all retired. And they were on this island. I mean, can you imagine island life, right? And so they start working with these monkeys, and they set up an economy, a token economy. So they get these monkeys to figure out that these little tokens are valuable, right? So they learn how to trade them and get some food and stuff. And we'll talk about with operant conditioning later. But what was amazing was these monkeys were actually pretty clever, because what they would do is they would set up different marketplaces, different shops. Each day they would come into these shops and they would set them up. The researchers would set them up with different prices. Okay, so at one shop, a slice of banana might be 2 tokens, and in another shop, it might be 4 tokens. Okay, something like that. And so these monkeys were incredibly smart, that they would not make any purchases in a day until they had seen all of the shops and compared all the prices, and then they went for the lowest price. So I mean, they're irrational in that way. Okay, but what happened was, now imagine you've got a slice of banana. You paid 2 tokens for a slice of banana. Okay, sweet. Now I'm going to say I'll trade you this apple, an entire apple, for that little banana slice. This apple is a 10 token apple. Okay. You have a 2 token banana slice. And these monkeys were just like, forget it. They would not trade. It took like, you had to have a ratio of like at least 10 to 1 before the monkeys would trade. And this incredibly irrational decision by these monkeys is exactly how humans behave. We call it the propinquity effect. Once you own something, it immediately becomes more valuable than it was before you owned it. Okay. So amazing how we can talk about irrational decisions that we make that can be grounded in deeply into our evolution. I love that one. The monkey marketplace. That is some research I would like to get in on. Okay. I worked with lemurs one time, but working with lemurs ain't quite the same. Okay, so some basic areas of psychology, or subfields, shall we say. A subfield is biological psychology, developmental psychology, cognitive psychology, personality, social psychology, positive psychology. Just a couple. These are what we call basic. These are the areas of psychology that are generally designed to learn the fundamental principles, to gain knowledge. And so we could find, a biological psychologist might be looking at the differences in the structure of a brain between a child with autism and a child without autism or something. Or a developmental psychologist might be studying how thinking develops across time, or across age rather. A cognitive psychologist might even look at, in this case, might be interested in studying autistic children, but trying to figure out, because autistic children tend not to understand sarcasm. They just can't figure it out. And so maybe we just got to add that to the end, right? There you go. Got it worked out. Somebody with personality, studying personality, I don't study personality. So, or social, like why people conform, okay? How come people become like others, right? They conform, and so all of a sudden you get a good boy. And let's say you get a boy who's very well behaved, very polite, and then he gets in a classroom that's filled with bad boys. What do you think happens to that polite, sweet little boy? Yeah, he conforms, okay? So all kinds of different areas and examples, in this case, research examples. And another side of psychology is applications. So psychology is a basic science which seeks to find the facts, and an applied discipline where we take those facts and we use them to make the world better. Okay. So a clinician, a clinical psychologist, might take exposure therapy and use it to try to reduce phobic reactions. A counselor might use the principles of psychology to help people with family conflict. An educational psychologist would take the basic principles of psychology to help them to eliminate learning problems in a classroom. An industrial organizational psychologist will take the basic principles of psychology and apply it to a workforce to perhaps increase the bottom line in a factory, make more money, right? Make more products. A community psychologist might work with a city to apply the principles of psychology to prevent elder abuse, okay? And then I guess I had clinical psychology twice. Oh, that's awesome. All right, I just noticed it. Well, at least I noticed it. Better late than never. Found it on the web. Don't ask me. Siri ain't so smart. So the last thing I want to talk about today for a couple of minutes anyway is where do psychologists go? What kind of careers, what kind of occupations? You take a look at this. This is, of course, at the top, psychology doctorates. And where are they? All right. Well, the biggest place where a person with a doctorate in psychology lands is a university. Ding. All right. Well, it's my home, but you got to pretend it's a university. But you can see that doctorates in psychology, they go to all kinds of crazy places. You see this? Med school, education, government, hospitals, healthcare. They're all over the board. They're everywhere. Huh? Yeah, I'm gonna get to that later. I don't. Yeah, nah, get to that later. So here, look at this. Students that graduate with a bachelor's degree, they've got a bachelor's degree in psychology. Where are they going to work? Okay, look at this: management, sales, social work, other management, human resources, other administrative, insurance, marketing, sales. Do you see therapy in here at all? I don't even see therapy on this list. Okay, did I tell you Dr. Phil does not represent psychology? Now, there it is. I mean, this is the truth of it. We track the alumni in the psychology department here at Texas Wesleyan, and yeah, I mean, by far the majority are not. The bachelors that are getting jobs are not. When it says social work, though, this is things like child protective services. We got a lot of people working out there. Catholic charities, for example, or other nonprofits in the community. So we have a lot of psychologically oriented occupations, but this is the truth of it. This is where people go. Okay. Or here, I like this little image. This was this is the whole thing, but it was too big, so I cut it in half. And so you see here, what can you do with a degree in psychology? And you can see the big circles represent the content areas of psychology, right? Sensation and perception, learning, personality, etc. The little circles represent different occupations that can lead from, because students that graduate with a degree in psychology go in amazingly large number of places. I mean, we got a software engineer over here, speech pathologist, web developer. Absolutely. Web development is 100% psychology. I've had some fascinating conversations with a web developer, and it's just amazing how much psychology this guy uses. And he acknowledges it too, by the way. He knows exactly that it's psychology. All right. So we've got up in here pharmacy, nurse, dental assistant, therapist. Well, obviously therapist, right? Down here, look at this. We've got voter outreach coordinator. It's a job, I guess. Okay. Political psychologist, social media editor, market research analyst. Okay. Advertising, public relations. Yeah. You think that you need a business degree to get these? No, this is psychology. All right. And hint, hint, most of business is really just psychology. They just package it and pretend it's not psychology. But look at that, athletic trainers, electrical, then I don't know, designers, computational neuroscience, sounds interesting. Human resources, obviously, educators, absolutely, game developers, oh yeah. School psychologists, teachers, daycare workers, this is all teachers. Marketing analyst, absolutely. Public policy influencer, absolutely. Mental coach, all right. Mental skills trainer, sports consultant, oh yeah, absolutely. Performance, all right. So you can see on these images, right, these two, that the field of psychology is huge. And I started out this chapter on when we started on Tuesday, and I said the field of psychology, in my opinion, and I'm biased, I got it because this is my field, but in my opinion, this field is the center of all disciplines. There is not a discipline out there on this planet, number one, that doesn't feed into psychology. Remember, the people that feed into psychology are philosophers, physiologists, neuroscientists, just on and on and on. And we feed out to all of them as well. And it just, I don't know. I'm totally biased. I totally admit it. Okay. And so finally, the last two slides are one way that the principles of psychology can be used by you to increase your course grades, to increase your study skills. Perhaps you've heard the phrase "study smart, not hard," and there's something to that. That if you use the basic principles of psychology to study, you will learn more material in less time and will learn it for a longer amount of time. Okay, so science has told us this is true, just like I had told you right at the beginning. The testing effect, when we were talking about the quizzes, the testing effect of Henry Roediger, that ought to be on this list right here. It's not. Okay? So that's what we got for the first chapter. And like I said, you must be patient with me, y'all, because chapter 1, I try to spice it up. It is what it is. Chapter 2, I'll do the best I can, but notice on the syllabus we only do chapter 2 for 1 day. So I'm gonna minimize the pain of that one, okay? Chapter 3 is all neuroscience, biology kind of stuff. And maybe that's not your cup of tea. I don't know. But starting in chapter 4, now that's awesome. All right. Starting in 4, 5, 6, then it gets so cool you won't even believe how awesome it is. Okay. But you've got to be patient for these first few chapters. Okay. So I will try to send a reminder on Sunday night, but if I don't send a reminder, it ain't my problem. Okay, this is you. This is your job now. I hope I remind you. Things happen. So these two need to be done on Monday. So got any questions or any ideas or thoughts before we call it a weekend? Any thoughts? Any thoughts? Is anybody in this Collaborate session alive? Yes or no? Is that a yes? You're alive. No, you're not. Whew, you're alive. Thank God. Woo, because I had one yesterday. Class was over, class was done, and there was one kid just sitting there. Guess what? I took him off my attendance roster, okay? I took him off the roster because clearly he had logged in, put his thing on mute, and went back to bed. All right. Have a good weekend, y'all. I will see you on Tuesday. And like I said, we'll just spend one class period and we'll just rip this Band-Aid off and move from there. All right? All right. Have a good one. All right. You too, y'all.
Have a nice day too, bro.
Thank you, Keontae.